Hey guys, Rebecca here. Welcome to my beautiful, super tidy, not really dorm room. Let's see, we'll be talking about, you know, no zombies allowed here. So I don't know about you guys, but I really liked this article. I thought it was really interesting, especially since I want to be a middle grades teacher, it was really applicable, to what I want to do. And it was really cool to hear about a classroom with that age group and how they responded to the class, to what the teacher did. At first, he started off the article with a quote from Lisa Delpit about the abilities of marginalized kids, Latinos and blacks particularly, where someone who has skills but no critical thinking is just going to be, a wheel in the machine of their own marginalization. They're just going to be a tool, basically. Whereas a critical thinker with no skills won't be able to get anywhere in the world that he's in. And so at first, for a long time, I wasn't really sure how that played into the article because I can't really see where he was going with that quote. But he says, when he talks about the media studies course, he says, "I knew that a media studies course would likely be met with skepticism by certain teachers at Quincy, who believed that any time in school away from reading, writing, and arithmetic was time wasted." And it's pretty clear that he disagrees with that statement. I happen to as well, especially because the media studies course sounds really cool to me. I would really like to take it. And I know I would have loved to have taken it when I was in elementary or middle school, because I don't know about you guys, but I loved messing around with cameras, just like all these kids obviously want to do. I loved making my own movies, and I watched a lot of TV and spent a lot of time on the computer myself, absorbed a lot of media, so it sounds like it would have been really interesting. But anyway, so he seems to be opposed to the idea that that school should just be about, the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, that there are more important things that you can study, or equally important maybe. And as I said, I fully agree with that. I think there's the arts and just other ways of thinking and other disciplines to think about are just as important as reading and basic skills, math. But then, near the end of the article, he continues, "I'm aware that if African American and Latino children are to have a chance at success in the society, they must be taught skills that will serve these ends. They must be taught to construct sentences, to compute numbers, to read and comprehend. Anything short of that is cheating them." I thought that was really interesting because I was inclined, to agree with him automatically with the first quote that reading and writing and math aren't all that's important. But he also makes the point that you can't just go off. Arts are wonderful, and other forms of expression and other forms of thought are great, but you also do need those basics. And I just thought that was an important perspective to keep, because sometimes it's too easy for me to kind of get excited about, like, wow, all these possibilities, all these exciting things we can learn about. But you have to remember that just in the world we live in, those basic skills are essential, and not everybody has them. So it can be hard, I think, to juggle those perspectives sometimes, to be between, like, well, don't just stick to these basics, like, enrich your perspective and broaden your mind and learn about all of these things, but then also that you do need to teach those building blocks. I think it's cool in this article that it kind of pointed out, walking, having the balance, walking the tightrope between those two very important things in education, especially for a community where a lot of the students are minority and a lot of the students might not have a lot of money. Moving on. I really liked hearing or reading about just what they did in the class and what all the with the students' responses. I thought that was fascinating because a lot of the things they said really surprised me in their depth, and just the really insightful conclusions that these children, well, yeah, 8th graders were able to come to. I thought that was really cool. And one of the things he does is, have them create sitcoms. And so when he's talking about that, he says, since sitcoms always neatly tie things up at the show's end, the students made a conscious effort not to do that in their scripts. They tried instead to deal with the conflicts in incredible ways that rang true to their own experiences. And I thought that was really cool that students were making those kind of projects, because it's just something, it's obviously kind of countercultural, it's almost it's sort of almost avant-garde, I guess, because it's so opposite of what, conventional society is doing, conventional media, conventional forms of entertainment and communication. I just thought it was so cool that these students were able to just flip that on its head and make their own creative projects with a twist and with a genuine message. And I just love that he gave them the opportunity to do something like that. I'd love to have creative projects like that in my classroom and see what my students can come up with, and probably end up amazing me with, stuff that you wouldn't expect. And finally, when the author talks about, or a part of the article that really struck me was when he talked about his incident with Frankie, where Frankie brought in the vastly inappropriate lyrics, and he meant to talk to Frankie about them, but he just kept being reasons why he couldn't, like he was too busy, and in any case, and he just never talked to him. So when he's kind of lamenting on the fact that he never got to talk to Frankie, he says, "Meanwhile, time keeps moving on. It's a teachable moment that got away, just one of many that I've knowingly let slip through my fingers." And I thought that was really interesting and kind of sobering for us future educators. The idea that there are all these moments that can be so important, and not just for teaching facts or for teaching theory or something, but what the teacher seems to be doing here, teaching the student about character and maybe helping the student learn more about who he is. And you can't get that stuff out of a textbook, and yet it's so important. Like, I strongly believe that having a strong sense of character and a strong sense of who you are is like infinitely millions times more important than knowing trying to think of an obscure math, the Pythagorean theorem. It's a good one. And it's also kind of a heavy responsibility that we have the ability to impact these students so much, and to have these teachable moments that are so important for them, and we really don't want to miss them like this teacher did, because it obviously still bothers him to this day, that he missed out on that chance to speak with Frankie. And so it made me wonder, how do we learn to recognize these teachable moments when they pop up? How do we learn to to see when is a great opportunity to really make a big impact in a kid's life? How do we develop that sense, And then also, kind of in the same vein, how do we learn to walk the balance again between learning what's in the curriculum, learning reading, learning film studies, learning what you read in the textbook, and learning about who you are, and learning about values and character and just things like that, internal characteristics. how do we divide our time as a teacher and keep the right perspective about what's really important to teach. And I just lost my train of thought all of a sudden. But I think that I got that out more or less clearly. Sorry. Well, let's see. Oh yeah, I meant to say something else. I have my little notes here. So, when we were reading about all the different ways that the kids were learning to respond to the message they saw in media and to pick out, the stereotypes and the misrepresentation, just like all these things that kind of lurk below the surface that aren't really all that clear, was really fascinating to me, because they got so good at seeing them, and they just saw so clearly how this isn't really what America's like. This is not an accurate representation of our world, but it's all that we're seeing on the TV. And I just thought that was awesome, because lately I've been, in the past couple years, I've been noticing more and more misrepresentation in the media, and just I've started. If you haven't heard of the Bechdel test, it's well, I don't really know what word to use for it, what sexism or something, but it's for detecting, I guess you might say, male privilege in movies. It's where it's a simple test conducted on any movie. Pick a movie, any movie, where where you see if the movie has at least 2 female characters who speak, and that those female characters speak to each other at least once during the movie about something other than a man. And a shockingly small number of movies actually pass the Bechdel test. It's really surprising. Like, I don't know the exact number, but it's low. And can you imagine, can you even think of a single movie that doesn't have 2 male characters that talk to each other about something other than a woman? I mean, it's pretty hard to imagine. So that's just, so since I've heard about the Bechdel test and been thinking about it, I've started looking at previews, and when I sit in the movie theater, see each preview and count on my fingers about how many have a male hero and how many have a female heroine. And the numbers are usually pretty strongly in favor of male. And so that's been something that's bothering me lately. And then also, I've started noticing too about how many of the protagonists are white and how many are black or Latino or, any non-white. And that one's a much greater disparity. They're nearly always about, almost a completely white cast of characters, which is pretty crazy, right? Since we're almost a minority-majority country, you'd think there'd be a little more representation. But anyway, all that long-winded social justice speech to say that I've been noticing that a lot lately, but only in the, only more recently. I definitely didn't think about that stuff when I was these kids' age. So I just thought it was really great and really fascinating that they were able to see these things when they're so young, and to see the injustice of it all and even do something about it with the letters they wrote. So that's my take on the video, or on the article. Can't wait to see you guys' responses, and have a great night.